Flashback to March break 2017. No virus, no major world issues, just me sitting in front of my computer playing Tomb Raider on my Mac Pro. All of a sudden, my dad calls me upstairs to help him in a game. I yell back, asking him what game he wants my help in. He told me it was a game called Kona, so I searched it up and saw that there was a soundtrack as well. I added the soundtrack in a new tab, and then ran upstairs to help. Going back to today, I realized that the number one thing that'll have you keep playing a game is immersion. Just like in Kona, the frozen Canadian landscapes just suck you right in. The story, so well written, will have you keep playing until you find out what happens next. This is exactly what invigorated me when I saw my dad play it for the very first time. It was nothing like any other game that I've ever played, which is why, when I went back downstairs that day, I listened to the soundtrack, and then, a month later, I bought Kona. Now, Kona is about Carl Faubert, a private investigator who is looking around and investigating a large frozen town for clues to not only find out what happened to everyone, but also to find out who killed his employer while finding out a deeper mystery tied into everything. This is a very deep and vast game, having a pretty surprisingly expansive map. It's very difficult to believe sometimes that this game was actually made by 3 people. Due to the fact that Kona is so detailed, I will be organizing this video by talking about the story first, then the gameplay, visuals, audio, some production history, and then my thoughts on the game. Spoiler warning, I will be talking about everything, so that means I will be spoiling the entirety of the story. So if you don't want to hear the entirety of the story and experience the game for yourself, go buy and play it. I strongly recommend it. This is a very good game, but still watch this video and like and subscribe. Thank you. And enjoy the ride. The game is set in northern Quebec, October 1970. You play as Carl Faubert, who after serving in the armed forces in Korea, had been working as a private investigator in Montreal. He's on his way to William Hamilton, a rich industrialist who is waiting for him at the general store in order to investigate a simple vandalism issue. Carl arrives at the rest stop to find it blocked by a road blocking barrier. He sees an observation tower and goes up to find a chest with pincers inside. He walks back to the road blocking barrier and cuts off the chain. Of course, in the obvious Canadian fashion, Carl leaves $10 for the chain and drives off. He reaches an overpass where an oncoming car skids and crashes to the side of the road, which in turn causes Carl to drive out of control and crash into a nearby ditch. A few hours later, Carl wakes up severely injured and cold. The world around him completely changed. Snow all around him causes his truck to get stuck in the ditch and making him unable to drive out. So, Carl opens his car door and stumbles onto the ground. He gets up and runs to the other person's car to discover it driverless. Carl looks around and finds a first aid kit in the trunk, a locked iron box with the initials WH written on it in the passenger seat, and a photo of a woman with poetry written on the back of it in the glove box. Looking around, Carl finds a cabin next to an observation tower and goes inside to find chains for his tires and a fireplace where he can warm up. After heating up, he leaves and goes back to his truck, puts the chains onto his tires, and continues driving to the general store. Halfway to the general store, Carl discovers that his truck is running on fumes and he needs to get gas as soon as possible. Soon enough, Carl pulls into the general store and finds that the pumps are off and need to be turned on inside of the store. So, he opens the door, steps inside, and finds his employer's dead body on the ground next to a torn envelope and surrounded by a big mess. Carl, out of respect for the dead, covers William Hamilton's dead body with a blanket and walks to turn on the pump. Right as he goes around the counter, an explosion occurs outside and the lights turn off. All the power in the store is gone, so Carl goes outside and finds wolves eating trash and then running away the moment that they see Carl. However, Carl recalls something from his military training.
Wolves always stay away from populated areas.
Looking around, Carl finds something even weirder. A giant chunk of glowing ice as if an iceberg came out of the ground. Further observations allows Carl to conclude that the generator is blown and that he will need duct tape and pliers in order to fix it. Once Carl finds them, he fixes the generator, brings the power back in the store, and then turns on the pump. As he leaves the store, he decides to look in the mailbox beside the door and hears something fall to the bottom of the mailbox. Finding the key for it inside, he opens it to discover the murder weapon along with a small envelope with a key inside of it. Remembering that he still has the locked box, he uses the key and opens it to find a cryptic, unfinished letter written by Hamilton. Carl walks to the pump and fills up his truck so that he can continue his investigation on who killed William Hamilton. Carl needed to find Giles Lachance, as he is the general store's manager and was infuriated with Hamilton. Luckily, Carl knew where to go. When Carl was first driving to the general store, he saw a truck on the side of the road. Thinking about the possibility of the truck belonging to Giles, he looks around in the forest and finds a frozen body a couple meters away. Wondering what that thing could possibly be, he gets closer, hears a high-pitched ringing, and then finds himself in a
World of dreams.
Carl sees footsteps on the ground and follows them to see a glowing man running away from a wolf. He continues to follow the footsteps and finds a campfire with a mysterious journal next to it. Carl reads it to find someone talking about a beast that excites wolves, terrorizes people, brings heavy snow as well as strong gusts of wind, and only moves at night. The man in the journal also notes that he touched the man encased in ice and saw things like Carl is seeing now. Carl puts the journal down and walks a couple of steps to find a glowing wolf sniffing at a handprint in a snowy mound. Carl moves the snow away and picks up a necklace with the number 739 engraved on it. Carl, not knowing what the numbers meant yet, sees a new path appear before him. Walking down it reveals the same man running into two wolves. Carl keeps following the footsteps of the truck and finds Giles' wallet, which puts an end to his otherworldly journey. He then realized that the man frozen in ice was in fact Giles Lachance. Carl drives on to the Lachance's house to investigate more, and as he's walking up the stairs, he finds a still burning crossbow bolt in the wooden pole on the stairs. Wondering who would have shot the bolt, he keeps walking up the stairs and goes inside the house to find it freezing cold, accompanied with another body frozen in ice standing in front of an open window. He goes up to the body, hears the ringing get louder again, and gets sucked back into the otherworldly ice dimension. Carl looks around and sees a handprint on the door and opens it to find Giles fiddling with a safe and closing a hidden compartment under the stairs. Carl then goes upstairs to find Giles grabbing his rifle with a sense of dread. He walks back downstairs to find Giles flipping a photo frame with the name Bertrand Lachance written on it. Back in the living room, Giles and his wife Giselle are arguing as Giles storms off outside. Carl then sees another handprint on the bathroom door and goes in to find Giselle on the floor writing in a diary, putting it under the floorboard and then disappearing into the abyss. Carl picks it up and snaps back to reality. Reading the diary, he finds that Giselle's mother told her that Giles isn't the brightest bulb of the lot, even though their names match. Giselle realized that her mother's words were true and also mentions how her husband is like a small dog, thinking that he is bigger than he actually is. Giles believes that he can blackmail Hamilton by using incriminating documents that he keeps in a safe that has a simple combination that he keeps forgetting. Carl reads the last sentence that talks about the death of a mysterious girl. He puts the diary back and walks to where the safe is under the stairs. Carl figures out the combination by using the first letter on the name on the photo frame, Bertrand, and the 3 numbers on the necklace, 739, that he found earlier. The safe opens, revealing the incriminating document that describes how Hamilton is blackmailing everyone in the village, and on the bottom of the page, written in different ink, accuses him of being a murderer. Carl looks around the home a bit more and discovers that with the amount of boxes that there are around, that they have just moved in. He then leaves, goes back into his truck, and drives to the Roy's house. Once he arrives, Carl finds a note at the door saying how the family fled because it was getting too dangerous. Upon looking inside, Carl could tell that the house belonged to a young couple, due to the amount of photo frames on the wall, high-quality French literature, and pages from a novel scattered around the house. Carl leaves and drives off to investigate the Bedard's home. Seeing that they have a large garage in front of their home, Carl looks inside there first and sees a puddle of oil on the ground from an old car and finds the father's secret stash of alcohol in the corner. Carl then walks into their home, finding the key under the doormat, of course.
What was even the point of locking your door if everyone hid their key in the same place?
And smells incense upon walking in, indicating that the family is very Christian. If you also couldn't tell that they were Christian, there were literally crosses all on the wall, a few photos of the Pope, and a Bible on the kitchen table to make it more obvious. By the way, Pope Paul VI, not the current Pope. Looking around, Carl finds the mother's diary and the daughter's diary. In the mother's, Sylvie's diary, she wrote about how she has gotten pregnant from an affair that she had, and how her daughter, Marie, has fallen ill. Luckily, Marie recovers, and a month later, the family leaves to Lac Saint-Jean for safety reasons. In Marie's diary, she wrote about her crush, Martin Blais, and then how she felt when she was sick, and her mother's worry. Later on, Marie writes about how she has to take medicine that Dr. Beaupré prescribed her, and in the last passage, she mentions how her mother is crying and is getting fat too. It's kind of offensive coming from a tiny child, but here we are. After Carl finishes reading, he sees woof and continues on to Dr. Beaupré's clinic. He finds the key, reads the note about how Beaupré has to go to another town to praise the doctor there, and goes inside. Carl notices an urn holding the ashes of the doctor's wife next to the fireplace and continues looking around to find a communist manifesto lying on the doctor's bed. He then sees the medical bed and notices the bloodstains all over the pillow. He then walks over to read the medical files to find someone fitting the description of what happened on the medical bed. The mystery of Rosaire somehow still being alive, Sylvie's denial of being pregnant with someone else's child, and the doctor's anger towards Hamilton being rich. Carl immediately could tell the doctor and Hamilton knew each other very well. Once Carl had finished looking at all the medical files, he sees a photo of the doctor's wife and remembers the photo that he found in the glove box of the car that he had barely avoided crashing into, and realized it could have been Dr. Beaupré in that car. Carl gets back into his truck and drives to Rosaire's house, and upon walking inside, Carl barely avoids getting his head blown off by the old man. The funny Quebecois man explains himself and talks about a mysterious being which had been creeping around lately. Rosaire could tell that Carl is freezing from the weather, so he offers a trade, a bottle of Caribou for a toasty winter coat. Looking around, Carl finds a couple of old Quebecois legends, such as the story about the Wendigo and the story about Rose la Tulipe. He also finds some history about Rosaire and his times in the war. Carl runs off. He has a hunch about Regine's home, however. Once he arrives, he sees a shooting range, an abandoned truck in his front yard, and a Patriot flag, only flown by the FLQ terrorist groups. Going inside the shack, you can't really call this a home, to be fair. Carl sees the mess and gets hit by a heavy smell of curdled milk, cheap alcohol, and boiled cauliflower. Observing everything in this home, Carl sees how Regine makes white whiskey, and tons of copper in the corner next to the alcohol station. Upon further inspection, Carl finds a recipe on how to make Caribou pinned to the wall, conveniently, and makes a bottle of it for the funny Quebecois man. Carl drives back to Rosaire and makes the trade for the Canadian winter-approved coat. Carl puts it on right after seeing the old man's joy of receiving the wicked nectar.
Quand on cherche, on trouve.
And Carl drives off to the Blaises' house. Upon arriving to the cute family home, Carl finds a lone boot on the porch, goes inside, and next to the door inside the house is a drawer that has notes from Martin Blais to Marie, saying how he has left for North Manistan because it is getting too dangerous. Carl finds a key to a cabin on the other side of the room, a broken mirror in the bathroom, and then goes upstairs. While upstairs, Carl finds the window open, a couple of disturbing drawings, no more woof, very sad, and Louise's diary talking about how she worries about her husband, Alexandre, because he emanates dread and murmured, "He's coming," in his sleep the night before they left. Going downstairs, Carl hears crashing in the kitchen and sees a wolf in the middle of the kitchen. The wolf, startled by Carl, clumsily runs out of the house. Seeing that he has investigated everything he could, Carl then drives to the woodlots. While at the woodlots, Carl finds a shack that has been abandoned quite recently, another cabin further down the road that is locked, and unlocking it using the key that Carl found in Blaise's house, he finds a note along with another key to a cabin in the northern forest. All the way at the end of the road, Carl goes inside of cabin B and finds the cabin to be pitch black with food ready and once again, fully abandoned. Carl quickly drives to the end of the road to find an abandoned car resting before an enormous landslide and a long path to the right of it. Carl gets a feeling that he needs to investigate all of the residences first and drives all the way back to the mechanic's home. As Carl pulls up next to the entrance, he checks the mailbox and inside of it finds a letter and a spark plug. The letter is about the spark plug. Carl takes the spark plug and breaks the lock and goes inside Lamoth's garage. Looking around, Carl sees his garage, a few broken down cars, and his house vandalized saying, Hamilton, I won't be your dog anymore. Going inside the house, Carl finds a manual for a snowmobile, a big mess of papers, a tinfoil cap, of course, considering he's literally a conspiracy theorist, and evidence to show that Lamothe is crazy about aliens, like I said. Carl walks to the back of the house to find the snowmobile, and Carl, having the manual, looks around for parts to fix it so that he could use it for easier transportation. He walks towards the garage, and before he opens the door, hears the ringing that brought him to the ice world 2 other times before. So, Carl opens the garage door and walks even closer to the victim trapped in ice.
The poor man, before being frozen solid, seemed to have been defending the entrance to his cabin. But from what?
Carl sees Lamothe working in his garage when he heard a loud bang from the door. He runs over and tries to keep it shut. Struggling, Lamothe feels the air getting colder and colder before being turned into ice. However, before all this happened, he threw something into the bucket above. Carl, coming back to reality, looks at the flying saucer in the garage, fixes it, and it hovers for a few seconds, before exploding and falling back down. Carl looks around some more and finds more evidence pointing to him being an alien fanatic. He leaves the garage to look for more parts for the snowmobile, and how to get onto the roof to get the note that Lamothe threw. Carl walks around using a path made to go onto the roof and constructs a bridge to go across. On top of the garage, Carl finds a hole, sees the note, and grabs it. Reading it, Carl finds out that Lamothe witnessed a murder and a monster that is half man, half caribou, and half wolf, which is frankly impossible because it should be a third man, third caribou, and third wolf, but I'm not the one making the story. Carl puts the note into his journal, finds some more snowmobile parts, and checks a path to the left of Lamothe's land, and walks down it looking for the snowmobile key. While walking down the path, however, Carl encounters a wolf that attacks him, so Carl throws a piece of raw steak, and then the wolf runs away. He keeps walking and finds a grave that has been dug up, and a makeshift gate. Carl breaks open the makeshift gate with his crowbar and walks down the boardwalk to find an enormous satellite blocking his path. He goes around and then pulls the lever to spin it around, and then he goes inside of the secret project and solves a puzzle in order to open the door to get the snowmobile key that is on the generator inside. He walks back to Lamothe's garage and finally fixes the entirety of the snowmobile. Carl fills it up with gas, starts it, and then rides off towards the cave. Walking towards the entrance, wolves run out of the cave, and as Carl walks closer, the air gets colder and colder.
Luckily, he had the coat to protect him from the biting cold.
Passing a campfire, Carl hears a wolf growling and sees it preying back from him. He keeps walking and sees the wolf dissipate into the ground right before his very eyes. Carl keeps going, fixing a bridge, and then hearing the familiar ring as he walks towards the victim trapped in ice. Wondering why this man was lying on the ground so afraid, he enters the flashback world. Seeing how he was running from something chasing after this man, Carl keeps following the footsteps to find him shooting something in the distance. Carl keeps going and sees the same man lifting up a large wooden board of some kind in the little workshop area. Carl then sees a handprint on a book next to him, and he picks it up, leaving the vision. Carl sees that the man's name is Regin, and that this is his log. The same Regin from before. Regin's log talks about how he's frustrated with the fact that people opened up the mines, and how Rosaire is willing to trade resources for Caribou. Not surprising. Regin then adds that the guns that were supplied were extremely high quality. 3 days later, he shows Giles the workshop that he created, and Giles just says that he has information to blackmail Hamilton. However, Regin disagrees with the way that Giles wants to do things. Regin's suggestion is just to blow Hamilton's head off, the easy way. On the 18th of September, Lamothe gave up being in Regin's little army against the miners in Hamilton. 6 days later, another member, Pierre, died because he was eaten by wolves while hunting. On the 28th, Regin realizes that he'll have to fight alone. Then, on October 2nd, he witnessed somebody die right next to them, and he begins to doubt his revolution. Carl finishes reading and looks around the workshop to find dynamite, a Lee Enfield rifle, and some ammo for it. He moves the plank that he saw Regin put back up and goes down it. Carl walks down the same path, and then
Carl suddenly felt observed. He was worried about a presence around him.
he takes out the rifle and readies himself. Then, the same wolf that he saw disappear into the ground before came out in front of him, and just as it was about to attack, Carl pulls the trigger and shoots it. It explodes in a snowy cloud, and Carl gets his bearings back and walks to the end of the cave, places dynamite onto the rocks, runs to a safe distance, and it explodes, allowing Carl to leave the icy cavern. Going outside, it is now nighttime. Carl pushes the ladder, climbs down it, and walks back to his snowmobile. And having investigated everything, he rides to the ice wall. Seeing it in his view, Carl gets off his snowmobile, walks towards it, and hears the ringing again. He goes back to the world of visions and sees the 4 victims that he has encountered before. However, he does not know what they wanted from him. Carl waits and then sees Giles walking into and through the wall. He then sees Giselle follow Giles through the wall. The 3rd phantom, Lamoth, walks through the wall as well. Feeling as if the burden of their souls are finally leaving the town, Carl sees the final phantom walk through the wall. All of their souls finally able to pass on in peace. The vision ends, and Carl sees the ice wall has disappeared. Seeing that the road ahead was clear, Carl gets on his snowmobile and rides until he finds a camp at the very top of the hill. He stops and finds a diary laying on the rock next to the campfire, and reads the mysterious journal. The author, seeming to be a hunter, wrote about how a beast has created an ice wall separating the north and the south of the forest. However, the author feels that it is his destiny to stop the beast, and that he knows all of its weaknesses. He also adds that the elders who spoke with the Wendigo said that it would never return. They were wrong. He then describes where Wendigo even comes from, how it comes from the Great Spirit, is full of hate, and has a thirst for vengeance. The hunter talks about how his bolt missed it and is tracking down 2 unfortunate people. Sadly, he will not be able to reach them in time. He concludes with the fact that the beast must be stopped, because if it is able to head down south, it would begin to terrorize cities. Carl looks at his map, gets back on his snowmobile, and continues on. Close by, Carl sees an observation tower with a cabin next to it. He gets off and takes a hands-free flashlight that has been lying on the ground, conveniently. He goes into the cabin and sees that the place had been used less than a day ago, and also deduces that there were 2 men in this cabin as well. Carl sees a letter on the table and sees that it is for Pierre from Wilfred, and how he has to be fined due to hunting too many wolves in the area. Under that letter is another one, dating 6 months later, Wilfred telling Pierre that he is going to put a padlock onto Pierre's hunting cabin, threatening him again due to the fact that he is hunting too many wolves after being warned about it again. If you were warned once, just don't do it. It's simple. Like, seriously. Carl keeps looking around to find a gun rack with no guns, 2 blankets on the ground, a pay stub to Alexander Blaise, and a jacket belonging to him that is still soaking wet. Carl leaves and gets back on the road, following the path where the trees divide. Carl encounters what appears to be an ice wolf. However, he doesn't let that stop him. Even when he sees the wolf going into the ground and tunneling towards him, Carl rides faster until the ice wolf gives up, and Carl arrives at a river where he needs to create another makeshift bridge to cross. After finishing the bridge, he continues over it and goes into the scorched area of the forest to find a burnt cottage. Going inside, Carl sees that the door has been busted down violently, accompanied by a burnt smell in the air. Carl also sees that half of the cabin had been consumed by flames. Looking around, Carl sees that whoever was in here intended to use the furniture as extra fuel. He goes back onto his snowmobile and rides to find another abandoned cabin in the woods. Once he arrives, Carl unlocks the door with a key that he found earlier and goes inside. Going in, he sees that the cabin had been abandoned for quite some time. Not finding anything interesting, Carl rides on until he passes an intersection where an ice wolf comes out of the ground and flips Carl's snowmobile over. Getting back up, Carl quickly takes out his rifle and begins shooting the ice wolf until it explodes into another cloud of snow. He gets back onto his snowmobile and sees a path in front of him that looks like it had been trampled by something otherworldly. He goes up it and sees 2 people frozen in ice in the distance. Carl gets off his snowmobile, looks at the victims, walks up the stairs, and sees the Wendigo, frozen in ice. He then feels the strong pull of a vision overcome him, the ringing getting louder for a final time as he gets closer, until he finally gets pulled into it. Carl sees a giant maple tree and a young woman lying down at the stump of it. Getting closer, he sees that it was a hunting accident. Hamilton then walks towards the woman and realizes that she is gravely injured. The scene then changes to Dr. Beaupre's home, where he examined her and finds out that it was just too late.
She was dead.
Carl then sees a dug-up grave and walks towards it, seeing her body in the hole. Because of the fact that the people did not know who she was, they didn't bury her in the village graveyard, but instead in a secluded area. Nobody could know about this, so they got Lamoth to bury her, as he is simple-minded and trusted enough not to speak about what happened. The scene changes to Dr. Beaupre holding a revolver to Hamilton in the general store, confronting him about what happened to the girl and denying her death. However, Hamilton, having Beaupre in his grips, knew all of his secrets. The doctor then shoots Hamilton, killing him. The doctor takes the box from the envelope, and as he leaves, hides the revolver in the mailbox next to the store. The scene changes a final time to the same maple tree from the first part of the vision.
Carl understood the ins and outs of the affair. A woman had been killed in an unfair accident, and a young warrior had damned himself to avenge her. But Hamilton, the one responsible, had already been killed, and so the beast could not quench his thirst for vengeance. And now, recklessly, Carl had pulled the bolt from the beast's heart. A beast who was but a young free man lost without his fiancée, and who had, out of hatred, become Wendigo.
Carl sees it and begins to run, ice walls rising up around him. Several ice wolves come out of the ground as he runs further. The Wendigo roars, walking towards Carl and reminding him of the victims frozen in ice. Knowing that this could possibly be his fate, he runs faster, shooting more ice wolves that he encounters. After running to what felt like forever to him, Carl sees a cemetery. Running down the path, Carl sees a small opening that he dashes into and pulls a branch down, creating a barricade between him and the Wendigo. Carl catches his breath and wonders how long he'll be able to be sheltered in this narrow passage. The Wendigo stomps and roars off, knowing that he has been bested by Carl. He continues down a path that appears to lead towards safety, and Carl hears the loud roars of the Wendigo, keeping him attentive to the sense of dread and possibility of death, and he keeps walking down the path until he stumbles upon a railroad and docks. Knowing that Carl can escape using a boat, he opens the fence and walks towards where the boat is. However, he still sees that he is in grave danger. The Wendigo is all the way at the opposite end of the docks, shaking the fence. Carl walks closer to the boat, and it destroys the fence, allowing the Wendigo to run to Carl. Panicked, Carl runs, gets into the boat, starts it immediately, and rides off, leaving the Wendigo behind. Carl, now safe, begins reflecting on everything that had just happened to him.
When you disappeared, so did Purity. I would defend Purity against the winds, the tides, against ice and blizzard. Could it be that all this was but a story of justice and vengeance? The soulful doctor, avenging his fiancée's unjust death by avenging this young woman as though she was his lover. Are these passionate feelings not precisely the kind of feelings that could cause a storm, petrify people deep inside, create monsters?
He keeps riding towards the light of the city in the distance until emerging from the fog, a rescue boat. The men on the boat are astonished at the fact that they found a man alive, and everything fades to black. The four main items that Carl has equipped with every playthrough of the game is the journal, map, camera, and flashlight. The journal, to keep track of what photos you took and what evidence you found. The map, which allows you to know where you are in the world and actually shows what direction you're facing. The camera, used to take photos of evidence you found throughout the game. And the flashlight, so that you could see in the dark. Pressing escape, there are 7 different things to choose from the menu screen. The map, which brings up the map. The journal, which brings up the journal. The equipment tab, so that you can select what weapon or item you want to use at the time. The consumable items tab, which shows and stores what items you are able to consume to either heal Carl and or lower his stress level. Then you have the inventory tab, which just shows you what you have that you can't consume or use as equipment. The documents tab, which stores every single letter, diary, log, note, and treasure map that you find during your investigations. And finally, you have the options tab, which allows you to look at options. When Carl gets hurt, you can use painkillers and or first aid kits to heal him. Painkillers heal you by a little bit at a time, whereas the first aid kit heals half of your health. Using cigarettes will hurt Carl by a little bit, but will decrease your stress level the fastest. The way that the stress mechanic works is if the stress indicator has a higher green level, then Carl is not stressed in any way. However, if the stress indicator has a lower green level, then Carl is stressed and would not be able to aim properly, nor be able to run for a long period of time. The way to lower the stress level, increase the green, is by being near a fire, smoking cigarettes, drinking beer or water, taking painkillers, and driving. Things that lower the stress indicator, raising Carl's stress, is by crashing into things with the truck, seeing wolves, being out in the cold for a significant amount of time, and seeing the Wendigo. The way that the heat mechanic works in Kona is by obviously going to a campfire, a furnace in a house, and the general store when the power is on to heat up due to the radiator. The heat level lowers when going outside with or without a coat. Without a coat, Carl freezes to death in 7 minutes and 30 seconds, whereas with the coat, it lasts 6 times longer, and Carl dies in 45 minutes. Going into the ice cave, killing you in 7 minutes and 30 seconds, with the coat. The northern forest, up until interacting with the Wendigo, kills you in 6 minutes and 30 seconds. And standing in a puddle, which actually kills you in 90 seconds flat. And yes, I timed all of these. Luckily, the heat level doesn't change when you're in a vehicle, a cutscene, right after interacting with the Wendigo, while running away from it, and walking on the path to the docks and then the boat to complete the game. The weapons in Kona are very diverse, with a selection of 3 melee weapons and only 3 guns to choose from. You can kill the wolves in many different ways. Speaking of wolves, there are 2 different types of wolves in this game, the normal wolves and the ice wolves. The normal wolves die by falling over, and the ice wolves explode after killing them with a weapon. With melee weapons, you have a selection of a crowbar, an axe, and a hammer. With the guns, you have a revolver,
Carl never thought he would be dancing with the wolves.
Lee Enfield rifle, and a flare gun. These guns kill both types of wolves, but the flare gun does nothing to the ice wolves and only scares the normal wolves away. The normal wolves can be encountered in the first section of the game, and the ice wolves can be found with one being inside of the ice cave, and the rest being in the northern forest. During the game in the main section, you can find 6 different talismans in specific spots around the map if you go exploring in areas where you're not needed to in the story. And there's a chance that you'll see a hole in the ground that has a talisman inside of it. In order to collect it, you may need to find a magnet and go to the doctor's house or the Blaze's home to attach string to the magnet. If you collect all 6, then you get the Talismaniac achievement. Treasure hunting, which is also in the main section of the game, requires you to find 10 treasure maps that Martin Blay left for Marie to find around the town. Finding all of these treasure maps gives you a letter from Martin, congratulating Marie, you in this case, and a prize from him, being the flare gun.
If he was to venture deep into the woods, carrying a flare gun definitely wouldn't hurt, Carl assumed. At best, he could probably scare some beasts off. At worst, he was in for a nice little firework.
The visuals in Kona are very reminiscent of a classic Canadian winter, being set in a beautiful snowy frozen landscape that is located in a lush forest and with houses scattered about. Kona being set in North du Quebec in the 1970s really makes that obvious with the vignette, blur, bloom, and a very obvious grain effect to add a vintage flair to the visuals of the game. The houses also really show age, with the wallpaper and toys being relevant to the style during the 70s. Another thing to add about the visuals is the fact that as it turns pitch black, the game actually feels like walking in a forest in the middle of winter at night. It gives you a sense of fear and tension even though there's nothing there in the dark. Kona gives off a creepy vibe without ever having jump scares at any point while playing, creating unnerving liminal spaces in this vast town where it feels that people should be roaming around constantly. The ice cave also really gives off an ominous, uncomforting vibe just by looking at it, and the random ice spikes coming from the ground glow and stand out even during the day. The vehicles look absolutely amazing, matching well with the time frame and fitting into the game world flawlessly. This game does an incredible job with the visuals and bringing you back to the look and feel of the 70s and the frozen landscape that it immerses you in as well. There are two vehicles that you can drive in Kona. The truck, which you start with and can be used up until the ice wall, and the snowmobile, which you can use to drive anywhere, but it's slightly slower. Both of these vehicles also have compartments in the back, the trunk for the truck and the back for the snowmobile, so they could store items that don't fit in your inventory. The truck is the vehicle you will be using most in the game, unless you use the snowmobile to traverse everywhere because of its versatility, and is quite fast and easy to handle. The truck model in Kona is based off of an actual 1966 Chevrolet C10. Also, the truck name Chevrolet is different by 2 letters to avoid copyright. In order to drive the snowmobile, you have to go to Lamoth's garage and find all the parts for it. All the parts for the snowmobile are scattered around Lamoth's garage. However, the only 2 things that aren't around are the snowmobile key and the gas can. The snowmobile key can be found in the secret project after completing the valve puzzle, and the gas can be collected from the Bedard's home. The parts that are around Lamoth's garage, however, are the bench, the tracks, the handlebar, the 2 skis, and a headlight. Funny thing about the headlight is that the game actually gives you 2 headlights due to a bug in the past where after interacting with the UFO inside of his garage, the headlight would disappear and you would not be able to complete the snowmobile. So the dev's solution was just to give players a second one in case the other one disappears, which actually doesn't weigh anything in your inventory and you end up getting 2 headlights. The handling on the snowmobile is fairly the same as using the truck, but has slightly more sensitive turning. The snowmobile model is based off of an actual 1969 Olympic Ski-Doo snowmobile. The sound design in Kona is extremely high quality and surprisingly realistic. Walking in the snow truly makes you feel like you are actually traversing during the winter. The wind howling through the lush forests, the occasional wolf howling in the far distance, the rustling of leaves and bushes while walking through them, doors opening and closing, fires roaring and crackling, water rushing and slushing, all truly puts you into the world of Kona just by sound alone. The music from the original soundtrack playing at just the right times, and the soothing and calming narration that just makes you want to hear more of Carl's thoughts.
What could these engraved numbers mean?
Really makes this game so much more memorable. Kona is accompanied by an original soundtrack by Cure Labelle with 11 songs in the aptly named album, Kona, Original Soundtrack, with every song being absolutely phenomenal in their own unique way and fitting perfectly with the game. The time frame, the whole album being inspired by 70s rock, and events that occur while playing. The first song, Kona Theme, plays right as soon as you open up the game in the menu screen. The song starts off with a slow drone, violin, and a couple of plucks from an acoustic guitar. It eventually progresses until the main chorus that's accompanied with drums and an extremely catchy melody play also randomly during the game. The second song, Vision, is mainly played during visions, obviously, that you experience after interacting with the frozen bodies. The main instrument being used is the violin accompanied with a low tone pad. The third song, Diligence, is another song that uses soft guitar chords that progress to a hyped up chorus. This song is mainly played in the truck radio while driving around the map in specific areas. The fourth song, La Danse de Barbière, I scuffed that one up really bad, which is a classic sounding Quebecois folk song accompanied with French upbeat vocals, which mainly play on the vinyl record players in the different homes and buildings that you go into during the game. It can also sometimes be heard on the car radio while driving, but mainly other songs as well. The fifth song, Menace, uses sharp sounding violins, a low bass tone, drums, and a quiet arpeggio after the 2-minute mark to add a sense of stress to the player, and is mainly heard when encountering wolves in the ice cave, and the last part of the song is heard while running away from the Wendigo. The song starts off slow, and then adds elements to add even more stress until the final chorus of the 3-minute and 6-second mark that stabs a sense of worry and dread into you. The sixth song, Légère Accalmie, is a very calming guitar playing a couple of chords and isn't actually heard anywhere in the game for some reason. The seventh track is Kona, Route 1970, and is heard, appropriately, while driving in some parts of the game. The song includes the same catchy hook, drums you can bob your head to, a sick bass line, electric guitars, a guitar solo, and a violin solo. This song is definitely something you can listen to with anyone and enjoy at any time. The eighth song, Nocturne, is a slow but intense acoustic guitar paired with light ambient pads and violins. It is heard right as soon as the ice wall disappears, and while walking around the northern forest. The ninth song, OVNI, plays while walking around Lamoth's garage. It features violins and an electric guitar and is packed with a strong high-intensity vibe. The 10th song in the album is Non Retour and plays when Carl reads the poem that was on the back of Isabella's photo at the end of the game on the boat. The song starts off strong and extremely upbeat, accompanied by electric guitars, rock drums, an acoustic guitar on the bridge, and finishes off strong. And finally, the last song on the album, Kona, Variation, has the same catchy hook from the first song and from the Route 1970 version. However, this song has a very slim chance of actually being heard in the game on the radio, and it features the same acoustic guitar, an electric guitar with delay, violins, and another absolute banger of a chorus to vibe to. Cure Label did their best to match the sound of this album with the game, and they absolutely nailed it. The inspiration of 70s rock truly immerses you into the game whenever the music starts to play. I personally wish that the devs would have added more areas where music played and more variation as well, but either way, it's still really good. And because of this album being in the game and some songs playing on the car and radio, turning it off is basically unthinkable. With a heavy read everything to figure out what happened type game, Kona really shines on Carl's thoughts or narration to accompany you whenever you find something significant or just in general.
What was even the point of locking your door if everyone hid their key in the same place?
It is sometimes annoying that when you read a document or a diary, Carl makes a comment before you even finish reading the first sentence of what you just picked up to read.
It seemed as though Régin had been ready to take up arms and slay people like Hamilton. Could he have committed murder for his cause? Who could have gotten killed in front of his very eyes?
Other than that, the narration really helps to fill in the gaps of not having any NPCs. Besides the funny Quebecois man, and due to the narrator's extremely soothing voice.
The old man's cabin had been very generous to Carl. He couldn't have asked for more.
Helps even more and allows for more dialogue to be much more memorable. Luckily, there is a lot of narration in this game, so whenever you feel like you're alone, Carl will have something to say at just the right time.
When finding a boot, one wonders what became of the foot.
What's really funny to me personally is that there is so much dialogue from Carl that there's even an option in the menu to have less dialogue, so that if you hate listening to the most soothing narration ever, you can switch it from all dialogue to important only. Keeping all dialogue and choosing to investigate everything in a different order or way, you can actually hear completely different dialogue depending on where you go first.
Frozen body. It must be dangerously cold in this place, thought Carl fearfully. Why did the man have a terrified expression on his face when he froze? What had he seen before he was petrified? A sudden cold snap struck Carl, who felt like he was pulled into a dream. Another instance of this magic ice. What was this one doing, lying on the ground, so afraid? The plot thickened like water into ice.
As well as the English narration sounding very good, the French narration sounds really good as well.
Quand on trouve une botte, on se demande toujours ce qui est advenu du pied. Carl trouvait ça inquiétant.
The French narrator is Guy Nadon. He also is the voice of many French narrations in video games and a couple of movies. One final thing to note about important only dialogue. If you left an area, you wouldn't get any signs or hints that there may be something left to explore in where you just were, but if you turn it on, then it will give you hints by using Carl's narration.
The old man's cabin had been very generous to Carl. He couldn't have asked for more. Carl still wasn't done with the mechanics place.
Kona would not be as memorable or as amazing if it wasn't for this dialogue, the narration, or the narrator in general. There are a total of 35 achievements in Kona. While playing the game, exploring, and or trying to complete it, you will complete achievements with whatever you do. The first and easiest achievement to complete is Rendezvous. in which you have to reach the general store. Last Stand, where you need to complete Charles Lachance's vision. Foster Relationship, where you complete Mrs. Lachance's vision. Lost Cause, where you complete Regine's vision. Journey in the Hereafter, where you complete Lamotte's vision. Then there is Winter is Coming, where you have to find a winter coat by, of course, going to the funny Quebecois man. Mechanic, where you repair the snowmobile. Fall of the Wall, in which you get rid of the ice wall by completing all the visions and then go into the ice wall. Murderer, where you find Hamilton's killer, being the Doctor. Amari us Cadmare, which requires you to complete the game, simple enough. Sorry, A, which is a secret achievement where you have to leave a $10 bill under the rock after cutting the chain at the rest stop. Onwards on Foot, which is honestly the longest and most time-consuming achievement to complete due to the fact that you literally have to walk for the entire game without using vehicles, up until the general store. The second most annoying achievement that can be completed along with this one is Marshmallows, which requires you to find every campfire on the game map. Carl the Explorer will be unlocked once you find every house and cabin in the village. Carl Faubert, Private Investigator, will be unlocked when you find all the evidence tied to Hamilton's death. The Hunt is completed by finding all the crossbow bolts around the game map. Treasure Hunter gets unlocked once you find all 10 letters from Martin Blaze's treasure hunt. Nature Lover, which requires you to throw steak at wolves, or just don't kill them. Jeweler requires you to find 3 talismans, and on the same topic, Talismaniac gets unlocked once you find all 6. Reader is unlocked once you find every document. Finding the rifle will start in a revolution. Activating the spaceship will turn you into an astronaut. Bulletproof requires you to shoot the Wendigo with the rifle. Sending an SOS will give you the achievement SOS, of course, by using the radio antenna in the secret project. Shooting a flare into the night will grant a star in the night. Close to the end of the game, if you throw a steak at the Wendigo, you will get the vegan achievement. By completing all the chess games in the houses around the town in Northern Forest, you will get the Chess Master achievement. Completing the game without any alcohol will give you Prohibition. Not smoking during an entire playthrough will give you Pink Lungs. Firearms Registry requires you to complete the game without shooting any firearms. Clearing the boulders near the Lachance's house to the right of their house will cause a big kaboom. Cozy Ambience requires you to light a dark area with the lantern. Photographer gets unlocked when you take one picture for the investigation. And the last achievement to unlock on this list is Paparazzi, which only unlocks once you take every picture needed for the investigation. This song is not on the official soundtrack. The developers did not want to break immersion, so they made themselves limit the times of cutscenes to make them 4 to 5 seconds so that players could have control over the game for as long as possible. On the subject of control, in the very beginning of the game, you are not able to walk back from where you drove from, nor are you able to walk towards your destination unless you're in your car. On top of this, you are also not able to leave your car until you reach the general store. You are not able to use any guns inside of buildings and homes. However, you can combat this by shooting into the building while not going inside of it. The area that you play in Kona is an actual place. It's about 60 miles or 96 kilometers north from
Shibugamu,
Quebec. However, Lake Atamipek is fictional. A little feature in Kona is something that can really change the game while you're playing it. There is an option in the gameplay menu where you can turn off the interactions with the wolves while exploring the town and the main forests. In the northern forest, the ice wolves are able to burrow through the ground and actually flip you off of your snowmobile if you're not far and or fast enough. During the final, quote-unquote, boss fight, if you get caught by the Wendigo by losing all your health, there is this cutscene that plays. Another fact about the Wendigo is that you cannot kill it with anything. No guns, no melee weapons, and no stake. The only thing you can do is run. Lastly, there was a bug where if you travel to the center point of the main road, where Sophie the giraffe and a bunch of trash is, if you walk, crouch, and then wiggle around next to the cinder blocks on the rock, there was a chance that it would shoot you up and propel you really high into the air, causing you to fly a significant amount across the map. This was a collision bug that occurred a week after the game was officially released and was posted onto YouTube by Skytech. Then he put it onto the Steam Kona community page where Jean-François Fisset commented on the video with, "We had tested several collisions of this kind. It seems that we forgot one, P," and then thanking Skytech for the video. Then a little later, Caribou removed both of those cinder blocks so that the flying man glitch doesn't happen again. Kona began development in early 2014 and then got released on Steam with an early access in January 2016. It was finally released on March 17, 2017 and was met with decent reviews. Before all of this, however, the initial idea of Kona was entirely different. It was originally going to be an episodic game with 4 episodes that still followed Carl, but instead of finding Hamilton dead and the funny Quebecois man, you had to investigate the disappearance of everybody. The original idea also hinted at multiple Wendigos, instead of just having one to scare the hell out of you. However, some ideas that was mentioned about the Wendigo was still kept, but in a different way. For instance, in the original idea for the Wendigo, heat sources would keep it away or destroy it. It would influence the weather and create harsh and strong blizzards hundreds of meters around it, just like how the northern forest is colder than the first section of the game. It would also make wolves more aggressive. The final product has it sort of similar, but the ice wolves fits the aggressive narrative a lot better. The vision system was also slightly altered. In the original idea, if you had enough pictures of a specific scenario, Carl would be able to imagine how it all happened. On August 7, 2014, Kona launched a campaign on Kickstarter. The goal? 40,000 Canadian dollars. How much did they receive? 44,271 Canadian dollars, with 1,304 backers supporting it. Pledging $1 would have your name appear in the Thanks to All Backers section of the credits. Pledging $5 would give you the first episode of the game. Pledging $7 would get you a copy of the first episode of Kona. That's just the same thing, what? Pledging $15 would give you the first episode and the original soundtrack. Pledging $20 would give you all episodes that would ever be made. 4 when the episode idea was still on the table. Pledging $28 would give you the season pass and the soundtrack. Pledging $40 would give you 3 season pass keys that you could gift anyone. This had a limit of 50 people. Pledging $50 would give you a boxed copy of the game. Pledging $55 would give you 5 season pass keys, which had a limit of 25 people who could get this. Pledging $75 would get you a shirt and 2 season passes. Pledging $90 would give you a limited edition boxed copy of the game. Pledging $100 would allow you to participate in 3 hours of Google Hangout sessions and discuss different things. Why? Pledging $125 would give you the Unity package containing the snowmobile and the truck art and code, with a limit of 20 backers. Pledging $150 would allow you to write on a special statue that would appear in all episodes, with a limit of 50 statues. You can have so many statues in a game, you know. Pledging $280 would allow you to write a letter that would be hidden somewhere in the game world, with a limit of 10 backers. Pledging $1,500 would let you name an NPC and would appear in the second or third episode of Kona, with a limit of 3 backers. Pledging $2,500, yes, this price is actually real, would allow you to design your own snowmobile or pickup truck. You can add any details on it and have it unlockable for anyone, with a limit of 4 GT Online cars only. Nobody bought this, and I think we all know why. When the Kickstarter hit its goal and $4,000 more, the campaign ended on September 6, 2014. Later on, Alexandre Fisset said that the $44,271 from Kickstarter would have produced a 5-minute game. What ended up happening, making the game longer than 5 minutes? They got extra funding from the Canada Media Fund, $113,709 to be exact, which ended up allowing the rest of the game to be made. Caribou has tweeted multiple times about the subject of a second Kona game being less than possible, but they have mentioned something being in the same universe as Kona, but not Kona. On September 2nd, 2020, a fan tweeted to Caribou saying that they really adored Kona and were wondering what was next. Caribou replied with, "Hello, thanks for the good words. We are currently working on our next project, but it's still too soon to tell more for now. We'll make announcements here as soon as we are ready." Smiley face. There have been no updates ever since then. The only real developments made to Kona was adding the game to the Nintendo Switch, Google Stadia, and adding VR support in June 2018. There hasn't been much activity on the Caribou Twitter besides the one reply giving a baby teaser to a possibility of a new game. On their Facebook, they were looking for someone to be a 3D artist for them, and on May 5th, the position for it was filled. In the Caribou Discord, Jean-François Fisset sent a message on May 28, 2021, saying, "Hey all, sorry for not giving any news lately. We are hard at work on something fans of Kona will love. Stay tuned as we expect to announce things later this year. Cheers." Kona is a game that is incredibly unique and very close to my heart. There is genuinely nothing quite like it. It's a game that, I will be honest, didn't fully understand at first. I had a lot of trouble finding places where to go. To be fair, I didn't know that the map and the document with the names in the general store would be extremely helpful. I never realized that the visions actually led up to the destruction of the ice wall, and I was never able to find Regine. The reason why I wasn't able to finish this game originally was because not only did I have a weak computer at the time, but I also played with important-only dialogue, and that significantly made me more confused and lost while playing. In a nutshell, if you've never played Kona before, don't play with the important-only option. Play with all of the dialogue to get the full experience. This reason I'm about to say has nothing to do with me wanting to play the game, but other people do have an issue with it while playing, and I wanted to mention it because I want people to know that it exists. While exploring, walking, driving, and traversing around the game world, there are loading screens that can take up 1 to 8 seconds while going to and from areas around the game world. Now, an actual reason why I didn't play the game much when I first bought it was mainly because my Mac Pro wasn't strong enough to actually run Kona at Ultra, and I'm the type of person who likes a balance of frames and visuals, hence why all the gameplay in this video are recordings of Kona in Ultra settings, as well as the fact that I didn't understand this game at first, trying hard to avoid the interactions with the wolves, and not being good at this game until now. I never actually was able to finish until November 2019, so I spent 2 years not knowing what to actually do in order to complete it. But when I actually found out what to do in order to beat the game, I was really happy when I eventually figured it out. Finally, all the secrets in this game have been revealed to me, and I understood the game and fell in love with it again after tolerating it at medium settings and playing it and not knowing where to go / what to do because I used important dialogue and didn't visit all the houses nor actually explore like a detective does in a detective game. The entire build-up, while playing from beginning to end, was an extremely invigorating journey filled with mystery, surprise, and honestly fear. The Wendigo is a disturbing and creepy monster. Even though you don't have much interaction with it other than running away from it, realizing that it's bulletproof and worst of all, vegan.
I thought the sentence was really funny, and I don't have anything against vegans or veganism.
Kona leads up to interacting with it in an amazing and extremely well-written way. The town around you has a giant connecting path of trampled bushes, plants, and straight up an entire tree beside the general store, and even has a path in the northern forest. The fact that you're able to see all of this not only puts more mystery and fear into you, but also it provides depth and extra lore, which not a lot of video games do entirely well and tend to do it a lot later in the game, rather than in Kona, where they show it right off the bat to tell the player that something big is leering over things. The way that the creators of this game were able to pull this off is genuinely impressive. It allows for the game world to be even more mysterious and immersive. The visuals are so beautiful because they created and copied from Canadian winters. The vehicles so well detailed, you could recreate them in real life just by using the game. The sound design's so well made that it puts you right into the game world and makes you feel like you're outside in the cold without needing to wear a coat. The soundtrack's so well made that listening to it will make you want to play Kona and hear almost all the songs while playing it. The gameplay is so incredibly smooth that it genuinely feels like a AAA title. This game is amazing, there's nothing quite like it, and I don't think there ever will be. People have been asking for a second Kona game, but personally I feel like it would ruin the game for what it is. It's the story of Carl Faubert, a private investigator who goes to a town to help William Hamilton, and stumbles upon something bigger after finding out that his client was killed. You not only find out who killed your employer, but also a monster that you can't kill. You can only run away from it, showing how realistic this game is compared to other games. In real life, you wouldn't be able to kill something like that. It's far too powerful. Kona truly makes you feel like you're in Carl's shoes by pitting you against something that's far bigger than anything you've ever encountered. This is realistic because sometimes in life you have no choice but to run away from something that's too big. You can confront it, but you can't do it alone. And if you try, then it'll be too much and engulf you. This game itself is just extremely invigorating and so much fun and reminds me a lot of Subnautica due to the exploring element, investigating your surroundings to find out what happened to the other people who have been on that planet, and encountering enemies. However, Kona is incredibly unique. There is nothing else quite like it, and I consider myself extremely lucky because I was able to be informed of this game's existence and to be able to experience everything about it. And yes, I did say that this game is incredibly unique and amazing many times, but I just do want to stress that this game genuinely is impressive and unique. I'm going to keep repeating it. These are all the reasons as to why Kona is not only the most realistic and immersive game that I have ever played, but also the greatest Canadian game that you never played. Thank you for making it to this part of the video. It would mean a lot if you like and subscribe. I worked on this video for a really long time. I want to thank everyone who stayed by me and helped me with the production and were patient with it as well. Thank you to my dad who found this game, my family for keeping their interest and motivating me to work on the video, my girlfriend who helped me find extra info like links and sending pictures and videos, my friend Jacob who also motivated me and kept my gears turning for an end result, my Discord server, link in description, for being patient and motivating me as well, and Parable for creating Kona and bringing this game to life and doing an incredible job working on it, and you, the viewer, for watching and subscribing, sharing, and liking this video. Thank you everybody, and I will talk about something new next time. See you, and big horde. Also, an important thing to mention, thank you for 100 subscribers. What?